Hello and welcome back to another War Thunder video, and we're going to go ahead and start looking at the guns for the US tree, and we're going to start with the US 30 cal or the 7.62 millimeter Browning machine gun. So to start us off, this is going to be a gun that you're going to see on a lot of planes, specifically at tiers 1 and 2. Just to list off, well, I think all of them. If I missed one, I'm probably one here or there that I can't remember off the top of my head. So you're going to have it on the P26, the P36, the OS2U, in case you have that, the Kingfisher, the SB2U2, the first one, the F2A1s, the P400, the P39, N and K in the Russian tree, the YP38, the P40C or H81. They're the same. It's just that the P40C is an event plane. I think you can buy it on the market, but otherwise you cannot get it. I think the H81 has also been removed from sale. I think I could be wrong on that. The XF5F, the A29 in the Chinese tree, the V11, the CW21, the P66, and the Hawk 3, all of those are in the Chinese tree, and the F3F as well. So, quite a few planes that get these. You're going to range from having 1 to 2 or even 4 of these things. For the most part, you're going to have 1 or 2, like the F2As, and the P26, or one of them anyway. The F2As have 1. The P26s have 1 or 2. The P36A has 1, the C has 3, and then the G has 4. The P39s and the P400s obviously have 4. And then P66 has 4. The Hawk 3 has 2. The XF5F, the A29, CW, they all have 2. The V11 has 4. The F3F has 1. So yeah, it's usually, well, I guess usually like 2 to 4, depending on the plane. As far as the ammo loads go, there's kind of a standard ammo load at tier 1 for the US at 500 rounds. However, the P400 and the SB2U both have 1,000 rounds. The V11 and the Hawk 3 have 600 rounds, well, per gun, I should say. The P40C and the H81 have 480, and the B34 has 375. So yeah, for the most part, you're going to have about 500 rounds, or in the case of the P39s, which I forgot here, they have 300 rounds per gun. The N and the K, that is, they have 300. The P400, like I said, has 1,000 rounds per gun. So 4 guns, 4,000 total. Now, as for the rate of fire, well, as you kind of saw here, we have a rate of fire of 1,000 rounds a minute. Standard. That's about it. And then for the belts, all right, so we have a default belt, which is a tracer, 2 ball, or 3 ball, 1 AP, and 1 incendiary. This is complete garbage. We have a uni belt, which is a tracer, an AP, and an incendiary. We have a tracer belt, which is AP, 4 tracers, which is just completely useless. And then we have a stealth belt, which is 3 AP and 2 incendiary. As for what to load, I personally just use stealth. I have tested uni. Tracers is just complete trash. There's no real reason to even bother with it. You have a single solid AP round and then a bunch of tracer rounds that, I mean, they can set things on fire, but the likelihood of that is next to nil. The uni belt is, I mean, there's really nothing to it. There's none of these rounds are really going to do a whole lot of damage. So just maximizing the AP really is the only thing that you should be worried about. And then you come to the protection analysis, which I think I forgot to do in the preview. What you're going to do is you're going to go to armor here, then protection analysis. And then from here, you can see all of the various different rounds present, or even secondary weapons, I think excluding bombs, available to the plane that you selected. And of course, I can switch to a different plane here to simulate a shot. But I'm not using it for that. I'm just looking at this. So for our muzzle velocities, since we don't really have any explosive filler to worry about, of course, the incendiary bullet has some, but it's a 7.62 millimeter bullet. There's not really a whole lot in there. The AP has a velocity of 853 meters per second, and the incendiary is 920. So overall, the velocity is really good. These guns are really, really easy to shoot with, and they really just don't do a whole lot of damage. Yeah, there's really not a whole lot to say about these guns. Unless you have 4 of them, they're pretty crap. So let's go ahead and get right on to the demonstration video, or the demonstration clip. And here we go with our first demonstration, and just as a reminder from the preview video, this is not just to shoot AI for the sake of shooting AI. We're looking at how much ammunition am I using to score a kill, and when I do score a kill, what am I doing to earn the kill? Am I blowing the wing off, blowing the tail off, killing the pilot, setting a fire, such and such. And if you want to do the math, the ammo counter is up in the top left corner. But generally, well, you saw at the start there, we blew both the wings off of BF-193, and you can definitely get structural kills, like the wing or the tail, with American 30 cals, but generally what these guns are going to be good for is putting bullet holes in engines, radiators, fuel tanks, that kind of thing. These guns are good for making life for your opponent kind of annoying rather than necessarily fatal, especially when you only have 2 of them, or 1, God forbid. 3 or 4 especially is good. They're still not the greatest in the world, and you're still going to have to dump quite a decent amount of ammunition into somebody in order to do something meaningful, generally speaking. You can do fairly well with them, but for the most part, they're kind of middling. There are better 30 cals in the game. There are worse. I would say American 30 cals are kind of middle of the road. But yeah, you could do better than American 30 cals. As far as long distance shooting goes like this, there's not really a whole lot of machine guns, or at least 30 caliber machine guns in the game, that are really going to do all that well. Most of them, they have an effective range of about 300 meters. You really don't want to go outside 400, and the Americans are no different. Alright, and now we have the 12.7 millimeter M2 Browning machine gun, or as a whole lot of people are going to know it, the American 50 cal. So this is a gun that is going to be on pretty much every single American plane in existence. It's honestly easier to list off planes that don't have this gun than planes that do. So I'm going to split this into 3 parts because there are 3 different belts, belt types that the American 50 cals have, and within the nomenclature of the game, we usually call them early, middle, and late war belts, or early, mid, and late war belts. So for the well, I'll go ahead and get the general stuff out of the way. The rate of fire is going to be 750 rounds a minute, and it doesn't matter whether you're using early, mid, or late. They are all 750 rounds. Thank God they standardized that, because the rate of fire of some guns in this game used to be kind of all over the place, especially for the American 50 cals. Actually, I'll go ahead and touch on the M3 as well. The M3 50 cal is only on one piston, or actually no, it's on two. It's on the F82 and the Firecrest. Both of them use late war belts, and the rate of fire is 1,200 rounds per minute. The Firecrest is one of the squadron point planes that you can get in the British tech tree. The other one being a what is it? A Sea Harrier, I think, or Harrier, one of the two. So yeah, only two pistons that have access to these guns. As far as the ammo loads go, it is a complete and utter mess. Early war belts tend to have about they tend to have around 200 to 300 rounds per gun. The P39 here, as you can see, is 200 rounds a gun. I think the P400 is something like that as well. Yeah, P400 is actually, no, P400 is actually more than that. It is 270 rounds a gun. The Buffaloes are a little bit weird. The nose guns in the Buffalo have 250 rounds. The wings have 400. And let's see, the P36 has 200. The P36, yeah, all of the P36s have 200. The P26A M30, P26A 34 M2, which is the P26 with the 50 cal, has 200 rounds. The F3Fs have 200 rounds, so on and so forth. The SB2U3 also, no, the SB2U3 has 400 rounds. And yeah, the P40 is like 280 or something, 235. Yeah, so the ammo loads for the not just the early war, but really all of them are just all over the place. Just to go to the lates here, these on the gun pod of the F82, they have 400 rounds a gun. The M3s have 400 as well. P38 has 500 rounds a gun. The PBJs, they have 400. The gun pods in the F8F are something weird. Let me pull them up. Yeah, they're 340 each. Yeah, 340. P47s are 425 rounds a gun. The P51s are 270 in the two outboards, and then 500 on the two inboards. Yeah, so 270 on the outboards, and then 400 on the inboard. One, not two. XP50 is 500. The 55 is 200. It's all over the place. It's a complete mess. As for what planes get these guns, like I said, basically all of them. So you have the P26 A34 M2, you have the P36s, the F2As, the P400, the P39, the TBD, the TBF, the SBD, the P40, the YP38, the P66, the CW21, the F4F Wildcat, the F3F, the SB2U3, the Martlet, which is also a Wildcat, which is a British event reward. Can't remember how old it is, but it was in the same event that you got the FJ4, which was a complete and utter disappointment. So yeah, those are all the ones that get early war belts. I'll go over all the ones that get mid-war belts in a minute, because those just, the number of planes that have mid-war belts is greater than almost all of them combined. Almost larger than early and late war combined. So yeah, there's a lot of them that have mid-war belts. So before we get onto that complete mess, let's look at the belts for the. Let's look at the early war belts. And your default belt is going to be a tracer bullet, a ball bullet, incendiary bullet, and an AP bullet, which is complete and utter trash. You have a uni belt, which is 3 AP, a tracer, and an incendiary. You have a ground belt, which is a tracer, 3 AP. Then you have a tracer belt, which is the reverse, 3 tracers and an AP. And then you have a stealth, which is AP, incendiary, AP. As far as what to use, ground belts. If you want to ask why, just do it. I really don't have the answer for you. If I was going to be completely honest, just looking at it on paper, stealth or uni would look like the way to go, but in reality, it's ground belts for the earlies. It really doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's just that's what you need. That's just what you run. That's what does the most damage for some inexplicable reason. As far as the muzzle velocities go, 832 meters per second for the tracer, 865 for the 50 cal. So your tracers are basically going to be on point with the AP. And overall, the ballistics are absolutely amazing. These guns are very, very easy to shoot with. Thank God, because the amount of ammo that you're going to have to put down range, well, if you don't use ground belts, the amount of ammo you're going to have to put down range is completely and utterly ludicrous. But let's go ahead and show you what the ground belts look like so you don't end up making that mistake. Alright, so now on to the early 50 kills out in the wild. How are they? Well, they're a lot more effective than they used to be back in the olden days, which is definitely an improvement for people who want to fly some of the lower tier American planes, such as like the P-40, the P-36, the Buffalo, and so on. They're not a cure-all, unfortunately, which, well, fortunately, depending on your point of view, but they still do fairly decently. If you have only 2 of them, like on the P-36, the P-39, the P-400, or if you have 2 of them mounted in the nose, especially like on the P-40 or the the F2A3 or the P-39Q, you can definitely do some pretty good work with them. However, only having 2, you would prefer to have them, of course, mounted in the nose, which fortunately they generally are, with then 4 30 cals backing it up rather than another 2 50 cals. However, the belts themselves, well, they don't really cause that many fires. Most of what you're going to be getting is pilots and whatnot. Pilots and wings, structural kills, blowing the engines out as well. That's a fairly frequent occurrence. You can get fires, but not nearly as reliably as you will in later tiers. These belts also, well, of course, the thing with the American 50 is you do have a fairly significant amount of range with these rounds. You can easily hit people out to 1 kilometer or beyond with relatively little problem. You might not necessarily get kills out at that distance, however you can with the later tier belts. These early belts, they are fairly effective, however they will occasionally let you down, and not really having any API, just relying on solid slugs can occasionally just, you don't really have the same fire starting potential as you will in later tiers, and occasionally the damage will just let you down. At the same time though, occasionally you will just one-shot bombers and fighters like they're nothing, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So yeah, sometimes they can be a little bit inconsistent, but generally they are fairly good. Of course, having 6 of them definitely does help matters, but of course you don't have any HE, so you're just relying on weight of fire to get the kill for you. All right, so now on to the U.S. mid-war 50 cal belts, which are definitely a step up from the earlies. However, the ammo loads are still just as much of a mess as they were with the earlies, and they are not going to get any better with the lates, let me assure you. Just looking at the A36 here really quick, we've got 3 different ammo loads on either side. We've got 200 on the nose, we got 350 on the first, on the inboard wing, and then 280 on the outboard. And it really doesn't get any better from there. As far as the number of planes that get this gun, well, or at least that get these belts, well, they're also a bit of a disaster. Just going down the list, we have the A36, the P38E and G, the JL and K all have the late war belts, which we'll touch on in a minute. The P43, the P63, the King Cobra, the F4U1, the F6F, the XF5F, the B25, the B34, the A20, the PBJ, the B26, the Marauder, the XP50, the XP55, the XA38, the Grizzly, the A26 Invader, and as far as and the PV2D, which the PV2D is a navalized version of the B34. Basically, the PV2D is to the B34 what the PBJ is to the B25. Basically, they just they took the bombardier's position out and then stuck a whole bunch of guns on the nose. As far as planes outside of the American tech tree that get these guns, or get these guns and these belts, you have the V12 in the Chinese tree, the A35 in the French tree, as well as the VB1002 in the French tree. And then in the British tech tree, you're going to have a couple of planes that get these belts. However, I'll go ahead and say this right now. The British belts are slightly different, but I'm going to do them here just because I don't think that they really make that big of a difference in terms of like the changes that they make. I don't think that they really make that much of a difference in terms of their effectiveness. So I'm just going to go ahead and do them, do the demonstration for them, and also show the belts here in this section. Just because I don't really think it's that big of a difference. So I'll just knock them all out together. So as far as British planes that get these belts, you have the Corsair Mark II, which is an F4U1A with clipped wings. Then you have the Beaufighter Mark 21, the Australian Beaufighter, the Spitfire LF Mark 9, the Spitfire Mark 16, and the Spitfire Mark 18, as well as the Spitfire Mark 14E. Both Mark 14Es. There's a premium one and a Tech Tree Mark 14E. There is also a Mark 14C. However, that one has the 30 cals. And also the Russian and American Spitfire LF Mark 9s all have 30 cals. They do not have 50 cals. It's only the British LF Mark 9 that has the 50 cals. So, as for the belts, well, for the American ones anyway, we have a tracer, 2 ball, an incendiary, and an API. We have a uni belt, which is 3 API, a tracer, and an incendiary. We have a ground belt, which is a tracer, 3 AP, an API, and an incendiary. We have a tracer belt, which is completely useless, 5 tracers and an API. And then we have a stealth belt, which is AP, 2 API, and 2 incendiary. Now, what you want to load with these guns kind of depends on what you're flying, in my opinion. If you're flying something like the A36 or the Hellcat, the F6F, the P43, something where the 50 cals are the only weapon that you have aboard the aircraft, I would say that running Uni is the best option. However, and I would also advise running Uni on something like the King Cobra or the XF5F, just because in the case of the King Cobra, the only other gun that you have is a 37, which ballistically is completely different from the 50 cals, and you definitely have an argument for using weapon selection and just using the 50 cals instead of, or just using the 37 instead of using both of them. And then in the case of the XF5F, the only guns that you have backing the 50 cals up is a pair of 30 cals, which is not really all that great. In the case of something like the VB10 or the P38 or the Canon Hellcat, XP50, 55, so on, what you can do is instead of running Uni in the machine guns, you can run stealth. So you can have a setup like this where you're running stealth in the machine guns and air in the 20s. Now, in the case of the Americans, this is going to be perfectly fine. I think in the case of the British and the French, or the VB10 specifically, it might be a little bit different in terms of where your hits are going to be. I think that you're still going to be able to get hits with the 50s and the 20s at the same point in space, especially out to about 500 meters. But out beyond that, it might be a little bit different. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't flown enough, well, really any Spitfires, and I haven't flown the VB1002 in like 3 years. So that I wouldn't really know. But in the case of those, it's really not going to matter because in the case of the VB10, you've got quad 20 mils. So that really doesn't, the machine guns at that point really don't matter. And in the case of the Spitfires, again, you got two Hispano Mark IIs backing up the 50 cals, and there's only two 50 cals to begin with. So again, that's really not that big of a deal. In the case of the Beaufighter, again, kind of like the VB10, you've got four 20mm cannons sticking out the nose. So who cares about the 50 cals at that point? They're just kind of there for supplementary use. In the case of like the P38 or the Hellcat or the 55, the XP55, there is definitely an argument to run, say, stealth in the machine guns and then air in the cannons. In the case that you just want to basically use the cannon only, you'd like focus on the cannon, focus on where that shot's going, so that way you can just basically blap somebody completely out of the air. There is also the argument, though, to run Uni in the machine guns and then stealth in the cannon, at which, with which you can, for example, if you're using weapon selection in a game, you can switch to just using the machine guns, and you can put some rounds downrange, soften up the enemy, and then once you get into closer range, you can switch to both and just open up the cannon and have at it. Within 500 meters, these two, the machine guns and the American 20s, are going to be pretty much at the same point. So you're not going to have to worry about the ballistics there. So yeah, as far as what you want to load, it really depends on you. Let's quickly look at the British belts, however, and then we're going to go ahead and look at the, well, we're going to look at the muzzle velocity for, well, critically the API, and then we're going to go on to the demonstration. So the default belt for the British is the same as the American, as is the Uni and the Tracer belt. The ground belt is a little bit different. Basically, we've swapped one of the AP rounds out for an API. So instead of having 3 AP and 1 API, you have 2 AP and 2 API. And the stealth is the same. Instead of having 1 AP and 2 API, you have 3 API. As far as what to load, again, it really depends on what you want to do. I would just say use stealth, because the planes that the British put these 50 cals on, Like in the case of the Spitfire, you're at 5.3 with a Spitfire. Why are you running? Why are you trying to rely on 50 cal, two 50 cals? It's not even that you got 4. You have two 50 cals at 5.3 when you've got Hispano Mark IIs, which are some of the best 20 mils in the game right now, to back it up. I don't really see the point there. But regardless, let's go ahead and look at the what is it? The ballistics here. So the API is 887 meters per second. The AP is 865, same as on the early belts, and then the incendiary is 944. So same as on the early belts. So yeah, the ballistics are these guns are fairly easy to shoot with. It's going to be very easy to get shots on target with these guns, especially having a decent rate of fire. They're not the highest for machine guns by far. Even 50 cals are, even some 50 cals are higher than them. Not very many, but there are some that are higher. But yeah, the rate of fire is high enough. The ballistics are, the muzzle velocities are perfectly adequate. So yeah, all that out of the way, let's go ahead and show you what they look like in practice. Alright, so the mid-war US 50 cals. These things are going to be a decent improvement over the early belts, especially when you start getting into the higher tiers, like when you're going up against 3.7 and higher. You're going to start getting a few more fires with these than you will with the early belts, and that is definitely going to help you a lot. Once you kind of leave the 3.0, 3.3 area, the early belts kind of start to lose their luster a little bit, just because they don't really have the fire starting potential that the mid and the late war belts do, and as a result their damage is kind of hampered by that occasionally. Sometimes you can still do well with them, but again, sometimes it can be kind of lackluster. As far as the mid-war belts go, well, this first clip here is using, this clip and then the previous one are using Uni, just to give a baseline, and by the way, that flak is a very fun and balanced mechanic, as we can clearly see. And then this is using stealth right here, just to show the differences between the two, which there really aren't any. The difference between stealth and Uni is really just which you would prefer to load. I don't really think that there's any difference between the two belts. The one limiting factor, kind of as with the early war belts, is just simply you have to get all of your guns on target, and you have to have 4 to 6 guns to really make these guns work. If you can't get volume of fire into an opponent, then these guns are really not going to do well for you. And even if you can, sometimes they'll still let you down. These guns really, they're kind of a middle ground. They work decently well, but there's still quite a bit to be desired. And it's kind of made up for when you have 6 guns. As a kind of demonstration of that, here are the British 50 cals. This is using stealth, which there really isn't a difference between the American mid-wars and the British 50 cal belts in terms of their effectiveness. You might get an extra fire here or there, but you're not really going to notice it all that much. There's the biggest problem really is that you're using a 50 caliber machine gun at 5.0, 5.3 or higher, and if you only have 2 of them, it's that's really not going to do very well. The bow fighter doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, if you're flying the British, just use the Hispanos. They're better. Alright, so now that we got the mid-war 50 cals out of the way, let's go ahead and look at the late war 50s before we move on to the cannons. So the late war 50s are, at least as far as the props go, not going to be anywhere near as ubiquitous as the previous two types were. However, you are still going to get them on a fair number of airplanes. So what planes you're going to get these on? You're going to get them on the P-51C, the D, the H, and the F6, the F6C in the French tree, which is just a copy-paste P-51C. You're also going to get them on the P-47, the P-38J, L, and K, the gun pods on the SB2C4, 5, and then also on the F8F, the gun pods on the F8F. You're also going to get them on the F-82, the F-8F1, the F-7F, the F-2G, the F-4U4, and the P-59. And that's the standard F-4U4, the one at Tier 3. And also, as far as F-8Fs go, again, F-8F1, the one at Tier 3. The Tier 4 one has guns that we will look at in a bit. So, with the F-82 just here before us, there are two different guns that the Americans have that get these belts. The first one is the one that we've been looking at this whole time, which is the M2 Browning machine gun, 12.7 M2 Browning machine gun. The other is the 12.7 millimeter M3 machine gun, which, as you can see here, has a fairly big difference in terms of its rate of fire. That's really the only difference, though. The ammo is the same, and so the ballistics are the same. 1,200 rounds a minute, however, is a fairly big improvement over the 720 that you can see down here from the M2s. Additionally, I'm not going to demonstrate the M3 specifically. I'm just going to do the M2 because, well, the only plane that's within the scope of this video that even gets the M3s in the first place is the F-82 here. And for all of those who might get upset at me for funny death laser not being in the video, like I said here, the F-82 has M2s in the gun pod now, and it has been like that for about a year or so. Yeah, it's not big funny doom laser anymore, or at least not as much as it used to be. So anyway, what are the belts in question? So the default belt is API, 2 AP, and an incendiary. Uni is 2 API, 1 APIT, and 2 incendiary. Ground is APIT, incendiary, 2 AP, 2 API. Tracers is all APIT, and stealth is half API, half incendiary. As far as what you want to load, tracers. That's it. That's the only thing you should run in these guns. And as you saw there's your ballistics, or there's your muzzle velocity anyway, 900 meters a second, or close enough for government work, which is really, really, really good. So yeah, tracers is the only thing you should run just because that's all API. These things are going to be causing fires, and occasionally you'll blow somebody's wing off, or hopefully you'll blow somebody's wing off. But if you don't, you'll probably set at least one, probably 2 or 3 fires on them. So anyway, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and show you what they do in practice. Alright, so the late war US 50 cals in the wild. Well, with whatever changes Gaijin has made to these things, they are definitely a whole lot better than they used to be back in the olden days. Hell, even just a couple of years ago, these are far better than they used to be back then. Still not exactly my favorite, just because, well, yes, you do have a lot more fire starting potential with these things than you did earlier on. They're still not really the most reliable at times. Sometimes you'll just fire burst and blow somebody's wing clean off. Other times it just feels like pounding sand. It feels like you're getting absolutely nowhere by just continuously dumping rounds into people, which is a problem that you've been having throughout the entire course of the development of these things, unfortunately. But sometimes it can feel like just as bad as the tier 1s with these things, just because planes are starting to get more durable at this tier, they're a little faster, and sometimes they're just eh. They do have very good range, though. You can definitely still hit people out to 1200 meters, like you could with the earlier 50 kills. And when you do, it's going to be a lot more reliable. Just do remember that for the most part, you are highly reliant on your gun convergence with these things. So if you run a relatively short gun convergence like I do, you're going to be better at close range than you will at long range. Not to say that you won't be able to get hits, it's just going to be a little bit more difficult. Yeah, overall, they're not bad, but could be better. Could be 20 mils. All right, now on to the first of the American cannons, the ANM2 20mm cannon. This is going to be on the P38s, all of them, the E, the G, the XP, well, actually, except for the YP. The only P38 that will not get this is the YP38. So, again, the E, the G, the XP, the K, the J, the L, all of those are going to get this gun. Additionally, you're going to have the F6F5N, the F4U1C, the XB55, the SB2C, the BTD, the P61, and the XB50. The rate of fire across the board is going to be 600 rounds a minute, which is pretty, well, it's not the slowest that you can get. Controllable would be the word I would use. It's a pretty decent rate of fire. It's not the fastest in the world, but it's also not the slowest. For some people, it might be fairly slow, and in my opinion, it's just you can fire off a burst without having to worry about using up too much ammo. In props, you really don't have to worry about having a massive rate of fire. You just having something like that slowish chugging, it puts enough rounds down range that you can make sure that you hit something without spending half of your mag in order to kill somebody. As far as the ammo loads go, the P38s are all going to have 150 rounds. The Hellcat and the Corsair have 231 rounds per gun. And the XP50, of course, notorious for only having 60. And then the SB2C, the BTD, the P61, and the XP55 are all going to have 200 rounds per gun. So, yeah. Overall, ammo loads are pretty decent across the board. The only one outlier is the XP50, which is 60 rounds a gun at any tier really is kind of middling, if not crap. So yeah. As far as the belts go, your default belt is HEFI and APT, and just that in that order. As far as default belts go, you could definitely do a whole lot worse than that. That for default belts, that is fairly good. Your uni belt is 2 APT and 2 HEFI. The ground belt is 3 APT and 1 HEFI. And by the way, that's armor piercing tracer and high explosive fragmentation incendiary. Air target is the reverse of the ground. You have 3 HE and 1 AP, and then your stealth is all HE. Now, let's go ahead and look at the protection analysis here and look at the velocities, because or well, just the specs really. So the APT is 780 meters per second, and then the HE is 868. Almost 100 meter per second difference, but to be honest with you, it really is not going to matter. What is going to matter, however, is the explosive mass of this shell. So we have 11.27 grams of explosive mass, and the TNT equivalent is 16.34 grams. Now, the explosive mass is a factor in really how effective a specific HE round is. Not necessarily cannons, because there are machine guns that have HE rounds. However, The more important number is the TNT equivalent, because the TNT equivalent allows you to compare the various different guns in the game, so you can see how effective a specific gun is to another one. The explosive mass is a factor. However, the most important number here is the TNT equivalent. Of course, the velocity as well is fairly important, because that determines, if you have a amazing, like if you got 50 grams of TNT, but your muzzle velocity is complete shit, then it doesn't matter. You're not going to hit anything with it. So yeah, as far as the effectiveness of, well, basically the stopping power of a given HE round goes, the important number is the TNT equivalent. Now, as far as that is concerned, the American 20 mil is one of the best in the game. The American 20s hit like trucks, especially this one. The A&M2 is an extremely hard-hitting gun. It is why planes like the XP50, the XP55, the F4U1C, the P61, it is why these planes are so feared, is because they've got this coming out of the front end of them. And if you're getting hit with 2 or 4 of these at a time, you're going to feel it, especially if you're flying something like a 0 or a 109. Or even a bomber, like say you rock up on a PE-8 with a cannon-armed Corsair firing this at 600 rounds a minute with 4 guns, you're going to rip it in half. So yeah, that is what makes these guns so dangerous. And as for what to load, well, to be honest with you, if you're just looking at the belts, again, it should be fairly obvious. Well, you do have the option, at least with these, like I said. If you want to run uni, then you can run stealth. If you, with the cannon armed, or cannon and machine gun armed planes, if you want, you can run stealth and machine guns, air in the 20, or the reverse. As if you've got the F4U1C, then you can just run, or the P61, then you can just run air. There really isn't a difference in terms of effectiveness between air and stealth, as far as I'm concerned. Yes, you have an APT round, but it really doesn't matter. The amount of HE that you're spitting out and how much damage the HE does, it's not going to have any effect on your performance really at all. But to back that up, here's a demonstration. Now that we got the machine guns out of the way, now onto the A&M2, and I absolutely love this gun. There's really only one thing somewhat negative I could say about this gun, and that is that, at least on the P38s, sometimes it can be a little bit hit and miss. Sometimes you'll hit with the AP round, as we'll see in a minute, and it just won't do anything, or sometimes you'll just get a bad hit with the HE, and it just won't seem to do anything. There's a hit with the AP round. And, yeah. Sometimes it can be a little bit spotty, but it's usually only a one-time thing. It's not very frequent. For the most part, 1 to 2 hits on pretty much any fighter in the game will knock it out of the sky, or at least will severely cripple it, and then the 3rd round will finish it. And when you have 2 or 4 of these guns, depending on what plane you're flying, then at that point there's really no issue. Sometimes, of course, you can just bracket a target. You'll hit each wing, and then you'll have basically the same effect. But regardless, you get like 2 or 3 hits on or 1 to 3 hits on a plane, any fighter anyway, and it's dead. Bombers, like 10 hits at most. Yeah, not even that probably. And if it's not dead, it's about to be. Everyone knows the IL-2 is a flying tank, not one that's getting shot at by one of these. The ballistics are amazing. The muzzle velocity is amazing. The HE round is just phenomenal. The AP is amazing. Like if you're shooting at tanks with the AP round, it's just phenomenal. There's really nothing bad I can say about these guns, and of course the ammo loads for these guns. 150 rounds at 3.0, 3.3 on the P38 is a lot better than most nations around that tier are having for their 20 mils. 200 for the XP55 again is a lot better than what a lot of people get for their 20 mils at that tier. So there's really nothing bad about these guns. The only kind of bad thing is just what planes they're mounted on. Is that they kind of tend to be bricks, like the 55 or the the F4U1C, and then this Hellcat here. But that's not really a problem with the guns. That's just a problem with the airframe itself. The guns, these are amazing. I love them. All right, and here we go with the ultimate of the American 20mm cannons, the ANM3 20mm cannon. This is pretty much only going to be at tier 4. Can't really think of any. Can't really think of any planes at tier 3 that have this. Although you're going to get it a few times at tier 5, but we're not looking at that. So as far as planes that you're going to get this on, you're going to get it on the AD2 and AD4. So the Sky Raiders. You're going to get it on the F7F, the F8F1B, and the AU1, and the F4U4B, and F4U7. So yeah, the AU1, the F4U4B, the F4U7, the A2D, the AD2, the AD4, the F7F, and the F8F1B. As far as ammo loads go, Jesus. So the Corsairs, so the AU1, the F4U4B, the F4U7, they're going to get 246 rounds a gun. The AD2, the AD4, and the F7F are all going to get 200 rounds per gun. Well, except for the outboard guns on the AD4, it used to be 200 rounds, but then they took 2 rounds each off. So now it is 198 rounds per gun on the outboards of the AD4s. The beer can is a little bit weird. You have 225 rounds on the inboard and 188 rounds on the outboard. So your outboards are going to run out a little bit before your inboards do. Overall, though, it's really not going to matter. By the time you get that low on ammo, you're probably heading back to the runway anyway. As far as the belts go, they are the exact same as the ANM2. So, again, it just kind of depends on what you want to run. There is a little bit of a difference in terms of ballistics. I think the AP is the same. No, AP is 832 meters per second. Velocity, actually, okay, so both of them are 832 meters per second. However, you are going to take a little bit of a dip in terms of your HE filler. So your explosive mass is going to go from, what was it, like 11.2 down to 7.76. And your TNT equivalent is going to go from 16 to 12.4. That's still respectable. That's still a hell of a lot better than most guns in the game. However, of course, it is not anywhere near as good as the ANM2. Are you really going to feel that? No, not really, because as you probably saw earlier, this gun has a rate of fire of 750 rounds per minute, which is definitely getting up there as far as rate of fire goes, especially for cannons. So you're really not going to feel that hit to your explosive mass that often. You might get a few more sparks or just light hits if you if you just don't really get a good shot and you just clip him with 1 or 2 rounds, kind of here and there. But for the most part, if you manage to land a decent shot, it's not really going to matter. They're still going to blow up just as they will with the ANM2. And to show that, here's a demonstration. So the ANM3, God, this gun is absolutely amazing. I will say right off the bat that you are going to feel the reduction in the HE filler. Like you can kind of see there, and as you're about to see here. That's kind of sucks, but for the most part, you're not really going to feel it. A decent burst, for the most part, is just going to tear most fighters in half. A little bit longer, and you'll tear apart attackers and bombers, or if not, then you'll cripple them. The range on this gun, as you can see there, about 650 meters, and it just ripped the back right off of the 109. And by the way, the same with the AM2, the range on both of these guns is just phenomenal. You will feel the rate of fire difference. However, most of the planes that have this gun are going to have a very, very good ammo load. So while you definitely are going to use more ammo to get a kill than the AM2, at the very least you have ammo to spare. So you can very, very easily get kills and have ammo left over. Assuming at the very least that your aim is good enough, which, I mean, when you have 750 rounds a minute rate of fire, it doesn't need to be that great, it just needs to be close enough, especially with 20 mils. And especially with 4 of them. The biggest issue with this thing is just going to be stock, because stock, these things are shotguns. So if you're grinding your way up toward the Bearcat, please, for the love of God, get the gun upgrade as soon as you possibly can. So here we go with the T-31 cannon. This is the last of the 20 mils that the Americans have in their tech tree. And you're only going to see this on 2 planes, the AM1 and the A2D Skyshark, which is a tier 5, so we don't care. I'm not going to do a demonstration on this one just because it's basically going to be the same functionally as the ANM3. And, well, we just had a look at that, so there's no real sense, in my opinion, to go ahead and do this one. As far as the rate of fire goes, it's the same as the ANM3, 750 rounds per minute. The ammo load, by the way, is 200 rounds, standard. The belts, well, your default belt is going to be better than the ANM3. It's 2 HE and an AP. The uni belt is the default belt on the ANM3. Ground targets is 2 AP, 1 HE, and a practice. Air is 1 HE, AP, and then 2 HE, which it's basically the air belt on the ANM3, but they switched one of the APs around, or they switched the AP and one of the HE rounds. And then you have a stealth belt, which is 3 HE and a practice. As far as what you want to load, if you're going after planes, obviously just load air targets. That's really the easiest thing to do. Or I guess you could load default if you don't want to spend the money, but ammo's cheap, so who cares? As far as loading, or as far as going after ground targets is concerned, honestly, it's probably a better idea to load uni than ground target ammo, because the practice round in ground targets doesn't really do anything. It doesn't do anything to planes. It doesn't do anything to tanks. I mean, it has 17 mils of pen against flat armor at 10 meters, which equivalates to basically nothing, as you can kind of see by the penetration table there once you actually start doing the math on more realistic targets. So just dropping the practice round and switching it for another HE is just going to be better in the long run. In case you come up against a plane or something, a plane jumps you out of nowhere and, oh shit, I've got to shoot it down. Well, then you have 2 HE instead of 1, which isn't going to do really much of anything. You'll still get air kills with the ground targets, but uni will be more effective while not compromising your ability to kill tanks, because you've still got 2 HP regardless of which belt you're running. As far as the ballistics are concerned, they are the exact same as the ANM3. The shells are the exact same as the ANM3. Of course, you got the practice round, but I mean, that's not really going to be that big of an issue. So, yeah, not a very remarkable gun. So on to the 37. All right, and now on to the American 37mm guns, the M4, M9, and M10 37mm cannons. Oh boy. All right. So, what are you going to get these guns on? Well, you're going to get the M4 on the P39s, the what is it? The N, the Q, the K, and Pokrishkin's P39, as well as, of course, the various scattering of P39s in the other nations, like the Russian one, the French one. uh, you know, all the P39s are going to get the M4. The YP38 also gets the M4. The P63 and the P59 are going to get the M10, and the M9 is only present on the A26B10, the first of the A26 invaders that you get in the tech tree. As far as rate of fire goes, the M4 and M9 both have 150 rounds per minute rate of fire. And the M10 has a rate of fire of 165 rounds per minute, so not really much of a difference between them. Where you will feel the difference is, well, in terms of the ammo and the belts, the ammo load and the belts. So the P39s all have 30 rounds per gun, well, 30 rounds. The YP38 has 15, and the M10 has 58. So that's going to be on the P63 and at the P59. Let me make sure that the P59 actually has that. I think it does. No, it has 45. So the King Cobras are going to have 58 rounds, and the P59 has 45. The A26B10 has 75 rounds per gun. So as far as the belts go, the default belt for the M4 and the M9 has the same belts as the M4. The default belts are going to be HE, AP in that order. Air target is going to be all HE. Uni is going to be 2 HE and 1 AP. And then you have a ground target belt, which is all AP. As far as what to load, well, if you're trying to shoot ground targets with these things, go right ahead, but I wouldn't advise it. And then you have your air target belt and the ballistics right there, which we will come back to in a minute. As far as the M10 goes, you have a default belt, which is the same, and the ground belt, which is the same. The only thing you're missing here is the air target belt, so the best belt to run is Uni. We'll get back to that. Unfortunately, when I was trying to get footage for this gun, I actually was having quite a lot of luck, and so pretty much all of the hits that I were getting were with the HE. However, I will go ahead and warn you right now, if you piston Gaijin's coffee on a particularly bad morning, then you are very likely to get nothing but hits with the armor-piercing round, and if you do, God have mercy on your soul, because that is some of the most painful experience that you can have flying a King Cobra, especially because you're flying a King Cobra. Enough said. I will go ahead and mention, though, that the Russians only have the default belt. Where is a King Cobra or a P39? Here you go. It does not matter which of the P39s you are using, or King Cobras. You will only have the default belt. Unfortunately, for anyone who decides to fly Pokrishkin's P39 these days, you have to have the ever enjoyable experience of having half of your ammunition spark off of a P47. Yay, fun. Especially since back in the day, the Russians used to have, what was it? They used to have the all HE belt, which was actually pretty nice. The P39s and the P63 outside of the Russian tree, however, have the same belts as the American versions. So if you're flying the French King Cobra or the French Aero Cobra, you do not have to worry about having an all default belt. Thank God, because these planes can already be painful enough, and that does not make it any more enjoyable. So yeah, as far as the ballistics are concerned, I'm pretty sure the M10 is the same. Let me just make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, they're the same. Okay, so you have your AP, which is 565 meters per second and 37 mils of pen at 10 meters. Good luck actually penning tanks for this thing. You can do it, but I would not advise using this for ground targets. Then you have the proverbial grapefruit that this thing lobs at enemy bombers, which is 45.36 grams of tetrol, moving at 610 meters per second for a TNT equivalent of 65.77 grams. Which for 37 is pretty decent. That's about average. It's going to be lower than the Russian and German. Actually, no, I think it's higher than the Russian, lower than the German, but that's not really saying a whole lot. And much higher than anything that the Japanese or that one Italian thing has to offer. So yeah, on paper, this is a fairly decent gun, except the muzzle velocity and the rate of fire. Like I said, I had fairly good luck when I was trying to find footage, or when I was trying to get footage for this gun, so my shots were actually hitting for the most part, and I was hitting with HE rather than AP, which is honestly kind of what I was trying to do. But yeah, this gun can either be very fun or it can be completely and utterly hopeless if you're using the King Cobra anyway. The King Cobra is already not a fantastic airframe. Put it together with a gun that has bipolar disorder sometimes, and you have a recipe for disaster. I am not a very big fan of the US 37s in general, and the M10 in particular. Yes, you have 58 rounds, but when a third of them are AP, that really isn't going to help you. You're basically back down to having this thing with a little bit more HE ammo. So, again, like I said, I actually had a fairly decent string of luck when I was recording the footage for this, so it's going to look a lot better than you're probably going to see on average. At the very least, in the King Cobra, you do have 2 out of 3, which are HE. So again, like I said, you have 58 rounds, but a third of them are AP. But hey, at the very least, 2/3 of them are HE. So if you get lucky, then you can definitely kill things. Again, though, you still have the problem of the low muzzle velocity. Of course, what's the quote that we all know? It's like throwing a grapefruit at the target, and it really feels like it. And it really goes for all of these guns, but the M10 in particular is pretty bad for that. Or you can really shoot yourself in the foot, and you can fly a P-59, which have fun with that nowadays. So yeah, let's go ahead and get on to the demonstration before I go on for too long about how horrible these airplanes are. Now we got the 20s out of the way. Now on to the 37 millimeters, and this is the M10, by the way, because it's on the King Cobra. And I don't really like this gun. I never have, and I never really will. The rate of fire is pretty low. The ballistics are basically shit. 610 meters per second is not fantastic for a, well, by 37 mil standards, it's okay. It's not the greatest in the world, but it could be a lot worse. For the standards of pretty much every other gun in the game, though, it's pretty crap. Especially when you factor in the bit of muzzle velocity difference between the AP and the HE, and all of a sudden Yeah, it's not really the greatest in the world. On the M4, you're probably gonna do better than you will with the M10, the M9 as well, but I mean the M9 is only on one plane. The biggest problem with the M10, and I was trying to get it in the demonstration footage here, but unfortunately the snail blessed my shooting with this gun on this particular day. So all I managed to get hits with was the HE. However, I will say from experience that it is not uncommon to get hits with the AP round, and when you do, it is intensely frustrating. So yeah, I do not really like this gun, and I think it really, really hampers a lot of the planes that it's mounted to. Low rate of fire, low muzzle velocity. Of course, the damage is great when you hit something with it. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's just getting that hit is... Sometimes it feels just like an exercise in futility, and then you get a hit with the AP round and you question all of your choices in life. So yeah, it's not really the greatest in the world. And there's the AP round for you. All right, and now we are on to the two 75mm guns in the American tech tree. And like I said in the preview video, I'm not going to do a demonstration for these because, as we'll see in a second, if you hit something with 600 grams of TNT, it doesn't matter where you hit it, it's going to die. So the Americans have two 75mm cannons. They have the T13E1, which you can see on the PBJ-1H here. And they have the M10 75mm cannon, not to be confused with the M10 37mm cannon. Yes, American designations are weird and mildly confusing. But each of these guns are only going to be found on one plane. Like I said, the T13 is here on the PBJ-1H. The M10 is on the XA38. Which is a Tier 4 premium. As far as the ammo loads go, the T13 has 21 rounds of gun. Or, well, 21 rounds, period. End of story. And an 18 round a minute rate of fire, as you saw right there. And then the M10 has a rate of fire of 27 rounds a minute and 20 rounds in the magazine. So, yeah, overall, it's basically just a Sherman gun that somebody decided to stick on an airplane. The XA38 is an autoloader, which is why it's higher than the T13, which is a hand-loaded gun. As far as the belts are concerned, the default belt is APHE, APHE, APHE. You have an air target belt, which is all AP. You have a muzzle velocity of 618 meters per second, which is kind of crap, and an explosive mass of 65 grams of explosive D, which is actually less powerful than TNT, at 63.7 grams TNT equivalent. Not that it really matters, because if you penetrate a tank with this gun, it is probably going to die. Then you have your HE round, which is 666 grams of TNT. Yes, the funny devil number. And again, if you hit a plane with this gun, it does not matter. It is going to die. But, well, as you can see by the velocity there, good luck, because it is 463 meters per second. Oh, that's 50 cal API, duh. Yeah, there we go. That's a little bit more like it. Yeah, that's gonna... Yeah, that hurts. So yeah, the velocity on the HE round is complete and utter trash, but if you manage to hit something with it, it doesn't really matter what you do, it is going to die. And even if you hit the fuselage on the PBJ, it doesn't matter, you're probably going to set all of the fuel tanks on fire, and then the wing's going to fall off. And if you hit the poor pilots in the face, well, then yeah, fairly simple, straightforward. Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to do a demonstration on these because it should be pretty obvious by looking at that exactly what this gun is going to do if it hits an airplane. So that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you for sticking along as long as you have, and hope you found this informative. And I hope you enjoyed it as well. Next video is going to be on the Germans and the Italians. So hope to see you in that one. Have a good day.